Welcome, everybody. My name is Joerg Hofmann, and I'm happy to welcome you to our session of panels with the ICE 365 World Regulatory Briefing Series, today on focusing on Germany. We will have a trilogy today because we are talking about three different topics in a row, just split among three sessions so you can have a break in between. And I'm happy to introduce to you my fellow panelists. I'm happy to introduce to you first Ms. Joanna Popovic-Kanaki. She's a managing director of Masterpiece. Masterpiece recently launched a new online gambling brand, which is Jack One. Next on our panel is Joe Samaras Smith. He's chairman of BD Gaming, which is an online digital platform developer acquired by the Hofmann Group in March 2020. And Joe is also chairman of AS Gaming, a joint venture with Hofmann Group, which will launch an online slots offering into the German market later this year. Finally, we have Luca Andrich, the managing director of the German Sports Betting Association. When I say it's a trilogy, then I can tell you this panel session, part one, is focusing on the beginnings and the development on the way to today's interstate treaty regulation in Germany. So we're looking how we were perceiving these new developments. Part two, later, will be focusing on the preparation of the industry for the new regulation. And part three will concern the question of what needs to be done to improve things in the future. Let's start with the first panel, with the first session. I'm happy to provide you a quick overview on what I think are the main parts of that development. We all know we have certain interstate treaties in Germany. I like to mention the one from 2012, trying to provide a licensing regime for a capped number of 20 sports betting licenses, which completely failed. In the aftermath, various discussions took place. The result was new interstate treaty coming into force on 1st of January 2020, now introducing sports betting licensing regime for the whole market, so no cap in the amount of numbers, but still continuing the total internet ban. And as you know, 1st of July this year, a new era began with the new interstate treaty on gambling, which also introduces a licensing regime for virtual slot machines and online poker. In between, there was a transitional regime, which was the attempt to transfer the unregulated market into a licensed market until 2021, end of June, and is still going beyond. If operators met certain requirements, they would accept it to be tolerated, factually tolerated, and deemed reliable for licensing regimes. This is what happened, and I like to see what my panelists can let us know how they experience this era on the way to the new regulation. We will certainly then touch probably not on typical grey market issues which we faced in these days, and taxation of illegal operators and taxation in the present and the past. Joe, probably I'd like to start with you. Please, could you just give us an idea how your company assessed the markets and why you aren't launching immediately if you consider to go online? This will be most interesting.
Yes, thank you. When we looked at the German market, obviously, and went into a joint venture with Hofmann obviously the largest land-based operator of arcades. So we had a lot of data on the amounts that German customers were gambling. From the grey market data, the sort of pre-regulation data, Germany looks like the second largest gambling market in Europe. And we'd really just hoped that the legislation would look something like the UK or Sweden or Denmark, that it would be a replica of markets that were working, that had got rid of most of the black market. And I have to say that it's been a horrible process for operators looking at it. There's been very little clarity about what the actual rules were going to be until really quite late. And it's for us, we are not even clear whether it would have been legal for us to offer a slots-only offering on the 1st of July rather than waiting for a slot-specific license, or we would have had to have some sort of minor amount of sports betting or find some loophole in it. Obviously, Novomatic have managed to launch Star Games back into the market, so clearly there are different interpretations of what the law is. But one of the problems we've had is that we just cannot get clarity on what that should be. So at the moment, obviously, Hofmann owns Blueprint Games and Edict Games. So we're having to do a lot of repurposing those games so that they have a lower return to the player, which will be a worse experience. If you look at Novomatic, the Green Tube games, they've done 190 games with a RTP of 88%, 90%, which is just a difficult player experience by comparison with the black market. So long story short, it's pretty unsatisfactory for operators at the moment.
Absolutely. I think we are following up on this in our third session, and what can be improved, because at the moment, these are challenges to the industry. Fully understand from the longest perspective, Joanna, you've seen the industry growing. What are your recollections? What are your experience from that time? If you look back years ago until everything, since everything started, and then till now, probably.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, I have been following Germany for 7, I guess even 8 years now, but from another side. So I was on the B2B side, and my first sort of a touching point with German market was with one of the first brands that launched, if not the first brand, that launched under Schleswig-Holstein regulation. And as all of us understand and know, it is also not an easy regulation. It also stipulates a lot of restrictions, but it's definitely not as challenging as the interstate treaty today. So especially when it comes to the technical framework. But thinking about what we were facing years ago and what is different to today, I have to point out that one of the majorly different things was the fact that we actually had a regulatory body in place. So there was a body established that we had a chance to have a dialogue with, a proper dialogue. We could have addressed all of our questions, concerns, and get the answers in a quite a timely manner. Sometimes it even came with an advice how to approach certain things and how to deal with certain details in the requirements. So, but in general, when it comes to the regulations, especially the complex ones as we're facing now, in my opinion, the dialogue is the key. So all of us know, that the devil is in the details, and if we can't manage those details and address them in the right way, if we can't do that with a proper dialogue, then what happens? There's a lot of place for interpretation of the individuals, and then the regulation doesn't make much sense. I also want to mention slightly players here. So players in the last decade or so have developed certain habits when it comes to their entertainment or the way how they want to be entertained. So what they want to play, how they like to play it, and also the bonuses they're able to receive and used to be receiving. So we all know that the habits are the hardest thing to break. So we as licensed operators now are actually facing that challenge. So we need to differentiate because of the regulation from what players are actually used to in the last 10 years. So, but back in the days, our hopes and aspirations were that we will live up to the day when there will be a clear, centralized regulation. We have it now. Like it or not, we have to live with it.
I think it's a very good point taken that dialogue is the key. Dialogue between the industry and the regulator, and this is something which we hopefully will perform in a very proper manner. Based on your experience from your B2B time, this was during a period in German regulation where there was legal uncertainty due to a very uncertain regulation. And these days, external foreign licenses, EU licenses mattered. How did you see the industry growing and surviving in these days? There was no regulation, no licensing available in Germany, but it was this struggle operating under an MGA license or something else. This was the way to to survive until now. Do you think now legal certainty is the option that will immediately take over everything of the market, or what is your perspective?
Well, yes, definitely. I mean, if you wanted to operate in German market with the lack of the decentralized regulation, you had to have one of the EU licenses, and this was the only way to have some sort of a regulatory framework. However, it was perceived. So this was the only way how to do it, and you know, again, back in the days, the Germany was looking into other countries, how other countries were doing, and it wanted to at the end of the day follow the same trend and have a proper state regulation. But looking at the main sort of goal or the purpose of any regulation, even the ones that were EU licenses, right, is to protect the consumer, is to have that framework, also for the business, so it is still economically viable, right? So looking at what happens now is interstate treaty went slightly overboard with the player protection, in my opinion, and the second part I mentioned. They didn't really fulfill, looking at the taxes, for example, that all of us mentioned so far. I was surprised to see that no real lessons were learned from other countries, not even from the EU licenses, not from the state licenses, France, Portugal. I mean, these countries were facing the very same challenges. And at the end of the day, the tax was not thought through, really thought through, in a sense that it was not proposed with any knowledge or proper knowledge, to correct myself, of how actual slot machines work, how, what is the mechanic behind, what is the economic behind the business. So unfortunately, the sort of shorter side of the stick was pulled by the players, because now they have this very bad and poor experience with having to play games with lower RTP.
I think this leaves space for discussing these issues, these challenges in our next panel. There's one authority starting from scratch, taking over, no experience in online gaming, at least the majority, I guess, looking into the past. This is really important to strengthen the challenges here. Luca, doing lobby work, analyzing the markets and representing the sports betting industry, and also representing the other trade association, the casino, or let's say the casino type industry in Germany. What is your opinion? Which political forces and which priorities, or can we say which interests, shaped the new interstate treaty? Why is it so as it is now?
Okay, so in Germany, we're obviously dealing with, so from a political perspective, we're dealing with a federal system. So, and unfortunately, in the case of gambling and online gambling, we are not dealing with the central government, but with 16 different states, and those states often, decide policies sort of according to party lines. And largely speaking, we have two broad groups. We have the states which are sort of, conservative Christian democratic states, often together with in governments with the liberals, and on the other hand, we have the SPD-led or the social democratically governed state. And over the past couple of years, you've seen sort of the conflict or the dividing lines, the politically dividing lines between those two groups. And obviously, the question whether Germany should legalize online casino games, I mean, to all of us who work in the industry, it's a no-brainer. But that was one of the key political battles that we had to fight over the past couple of years, and it was a huge undertaking, convincing the socially democratic state and to get a majority for this sort of paradigm shift in gambling regulation. And I think the problems that we all know that exists, and it was mentioned that player protection mechanisms maybe went a bit overboard. That was sort of the political price for opening up these markets. And it's also absolutely correct that Germany hasn't learned and looked at what other states have done. They haven't sort of learned the lessons. We've repeatedly pointed out to them. We've done comparative studies showing, for example, how taxation works, the economic bit, legal analyses, and we've shown them that the model that they are pursuing is unlikely to work in the long term, and yet, at the end of the day, the key political decision makers tell us, we understand these arguments, but in the federalist system, you have to reach some sort of compromise, and that's it. And for this round, and you will have to keep on working to improve the system from within. So once you're regulated operators, and that's where the importance of the dialogue comes in, and we're glad that we will eventually have a centralized regulatory body. Even though I should say, as a sort of footnote, the 16 länder will still play a part in this. You have one central authority, but the authority is sort of steered by an administrative council, which where each of the 16 states is represented.
Meaning it's lacking the administrative power. Maybe half a minute. Taxation. Finally, we got this 5.0% tax rate on stakes, also for the gaming type offerings. How could this happen? Is there no dialogue between regulation and the Federal Ministry of Finance? Because we know the consequences for the industry.
Unfortunately, I mean, it is hard to believe, but in that case, from what we know and understand, there was hardly any dialogue between the gambling regulators and the persons responsible in the 16 ministries of finance before taking that decision. And the unfortunate sort of the perspective that the Ministry of Finance seems to take is they want to preserve and protect the system of gambling taxation that is in place, or that has been in place for the retail industry. And since they're now sort of adding on, online games, online casino games, they seem to think that it needs to correspond exactly to what happens in the retail sector. However, we think that leads to massive imbalances in the market. There's no level playing field as a result, and therefore we took the decision as a trade association to file a state aid complaint with the European Commission, and we understand the Commission is very open to these arguments and is engaging with the German federal government, and we are likely to find out in the autumn if and whether the European Commission wants to pursue this any further.
Right, thank you very much. Time is over. That's an interesting point. I think we'll touch on this in our third session. Let's now move on session 2, where we discuss how the industry prepared for new regulation. Thank you so far, and please stay tuned.